No one could have anticipated what would occur within that courtroom. The courtroom hummed with an anxious tension that was almost palpable. All of the seats were filled, and the aisles were packed with reporters, cameramen, and onlookers eager for a glimpse of the spectacle about to be played out. The walls, veneered with smooth wood, echoed the bursts of cameras, sending almost otherworldly strobe-like flashes that seemed to freeze the scene in time. Whispers circled the room like smoke, questions and guesses, and fearful predictions, all jumbled together into an avalanche of curiosity. Relatives were seated in the front, their faces drained and taut, as if the air had become too thick to inhale. They eschewed eye contact with one another, each trapped in private despair. Others gripped their fists in their laps so tightly the nails bit into the palms of their hands, attempting to ground themselves against the tide of fear that sought to engulf them. Others gazed numbly at the carpet, their thoughts shifting over years of experience, memories now sullied by the stain of betrayal. Across the room, the media jostled for position, cameras at the ready, microphones held high. Reporters huddled tightly together, whispering frantically to one another, their pens scribbling madly as they attempted to convey the tension. Out in the hallway, people had begun to congregate, their phones held aloft, all competing to be the first to hear what happened within. Social media alerts hummed with speculation, courtroom drama, family secrets uncovered. Shocking trial today. Don't miss it. The world waited, holding its breath, and the back door of the courtroom swung open. Instantly, there was a hush, as if a switch had been flipped. In came the defendant, flanked by officers, white-faced and fear-etched. All eyes in the room seemed to follow their every move, recording every quiver, every anxious look. They stepped slowly, as if hesitantly, as if the very floor was likely to betray them. Gasps were heard throughout the room, not only from the media or the spectators, but even from the family themselves. This was the individual who had been a rock of the family, the person who had been relied upon to hold it together. And now they were here, charged with threatening to dismantle it all. The eyes of the defendant darted around the room, locking briefly with family members' glances. There was shock, fear, anger, and pain in those glances, a reflection of the pain accumulated quietly for years. For a few, it was disbelief. For others, it was so profound a grief, it left them momentarily stunned. The crushing weight of what was to befall them pressed upon the room like an unseen presence, with each gasp heavier than the last. As the defendant sat down, the judge made his entrance. The room contracted in the presence of power. All hushed whispers ceased at once, giving way to silence so profound it was almost sufficient to silence the senses. The judge, serious and unruffled, stepped up to the bench, the robes rustling slightly with every movement. All eyes were locked, all ears straining to hear the first sound. The judge's gavel rose, a plain wooden tool, but in that instant, imbued with the power of truth, judgment, and fate. Bang! The noise echoed off the courtroom, reminiscent of a thunderclap amidst an already turbulent sky. Silence descended like a weighty curtain, settling over all within. Court is now in session, the judge declared, voice steady but authoritative, resonating within the quiet room. The words were almost ritualistic, but beneath them lurked a threat. This trial would not be straightforward, and nothing within would be easy. Each heartbeat in the room appeared to be magnified. The crowd sensed it, the thumping rise and fall of tension in the defendant's chest, the shake of fear in the hands of the witnesses, the shallow, nervous gasps of the family members who had gathered to confront realities they had long attempted to deny. Strangers, enemies, and friends sensed the weight of the moment, leaning forward, waiting. They understood that this trial was about something more than law. It was about betrayal, heartache, and secrets kept for too long in silence. The prosecuting attorney stood, smoothing their suit, gaze on the defendant with a combination of resolve and indignation. Papers rustled, pens scratched, cameras clicked. The room was charged with anticipation, as the lull before thunder issues forth. Any movement, any murmur seemed to be exaggerated, amplified by the group's trepidation that clung to the air. Family members looked at each other, some guarded, some accusatory. Their bond, once outwardly immutable, now teetered on the brink of collapse, like fragile glass that might splinter with a mere touch. Reminiscences of laughter, holidays, and joyous moments were now tainted with suspicion and betrayal. Who could have predicted that one day, in one courtroom, so many secrets, so many concealed truths would be revealed? Even the audience felt it. Some wriggled uncomfortably in their seats, clinging to their armrests as if they might get drawn into the emotional storm. Others leaned over to their neighbors and whispered predictions of what would happen next. All eyes were on the defendant, all ears straining to hear the sound of the gavel, all minds racing to anticipate the shocks that were about to be unleashed. And then a hushed voice shattered the strain. The clerk reciting the charges. Every word echoed with a heaviness that felt as though it bore down on every chest. The charges that had been muttered in corridors and behind closed doors were now out, spoken aloud for all to hear. Whispers circulated around the room like fire. Even the people who had anticipated theatrics were taken aback at the viciousness, at the betrayal that had finally been rendered public. The defendant's hands shook as they clutched the arms of the chair. Her face was colorless, eyes flicking furtively from the judge to the relatives, from the lawyers to the press. It was fear, it was remorse, and the growing understanding that no falsehood could conceal reality forever. Each passing moment within that space seemed to drag out interminably, as if time itself had slowed to allow the realities to sink in. Outside, the world waited while it did not know that within lives were being destroyed, reputations ruined, and hearts broken in ways that could never be repaired. Cameras caught every face, every shake, every whispered response, fueling the media hysteria that would blow its top once details of the trial were made public. Yet at that instant, the courtroom was sealed within itself, a bubble of tension, emotion, and imminent disclosure that nothing could pierce. And thus, the trial commenced, not with shouting, nor with violence, but with tension, with anticipation, a slow, suffocating silence. Every breath hung with emotion. Every look, every movement spoke. And as the first witness was sworn in, it was starkly apparent, nothing in this courtroom would ever be the same again. The air in the room was still thick with tension from the arrival of the defendant. Each seat in the room was electric with expectation, and the crowd leaned forward as the prosecutor stood, papers clutched in hand, ready to start. There was an edge to their voice, a tightly leashed intensity that quieted even the murmurs of the reporters. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, scanning the courtroom with circumspect eyes. "This case is more than what was done. It is about the lies, the betrayals, and the secrets that have destroyed a family for years." The words strike the room like a blow. Family members fidgeted uncomfortably in their seats, and the defendant's hands clenched into fists. Recollections of fights, clandestine talks, and strange antics all seemed to come rushing back, one after another, each one now burdened with weight they previously hadn't known. The first witness was summoned, a close family member who had once been the defendant's confidant. Their movements were labored, hesitant, as if the ground beneath them might give away. At the stand, their voice trembled, hardly above a whisper at first. "I never thought I'd have to utter these words out loud," they confessed, tears brimming in their eyes. "But the truth can no longer be concealed." Then agonizingly, slowly they started to tell of the events that years ago had been whispered about in secret. Tales of manipulation, of deception, and furtive decisions that had poisoned the family in silence were exposed. And every detail hit like a hammer, echoing throughout the courtroom. Spectators gasped, covering mouths in shock, not quite able to believe the betrayal being uncovered before them. The prosecutor led the testimony skillfully, making sure that every lie, every secret act, and every betrayed trust was revealed. The defense attorney attempted to interrupt, but evidence was piling up. With each photograph, each message, each secret chat, another piece of truth was unveiled. The room was filled with unbearable tension, a suffocating feeling, as people understood just how deep-rooted the betrayal was. They responded in real time. Some cried outright, holding tissues as their bodies shook with sobs. Others just gazed, unable to believe that a person they had loved and trusted could have so secretly, so deceitfully behaved. Parents, Siblings and even distant family members were locked in a combination of anger and grief. Previous memories now poisoned by the revelations in front of them. The second witness testified. A family friend who had known them for years. I saw things that didn't add up. They started, their voice strong but laced with sadness. Late night phone calls, secret messages, sudden absences. At first I didn't want to think it, but now it's obvious. The courtroom stood still in stunned silence as they unfolded evidence they had gathered secretly over months. Pictures, text messages, and intimate recordings were shown. Each displayed a layer of dishonesty that everyone but a handful had not noticed. Every other pair of eyes grew wide as the facts came together piece by piece. Even the defendant appeared stunned, as if they had not quite expected the extent of revelation. As the testimony went on, the story of deception deepened. Covert transactions in money, clandestine meetings, and skillfully woven deceptions were unraveled. It was as if the walls of the courtroom had grown wider to accommodate all the truth hidden for years. With every disclosure, the defendants' tranquil demeanor started to break. Their hands shook. Their face, once tranquil, now reflected a combination of fear and desperation. The prosecutor leaned forward, eyes locked on the defendant. Every lie has consequences. Every secret has a cost. And today, the cost of your actions is becoming painfully clear to everyone in this room. A few family members started murmuring small, hushed words to one another, expressing indignation, shock, and sorrow. I cannot believe this all these years, whispered one, shuddering her head. Another whispered, why were we so blind? Even the spectators, strangers to the family drama, were affected. Some covered their mouths. Others whispered to their neighbors, captivated by the raw human emotion unfolding before them. The courtroom was no longer just a legal battleground. It had become a stage for heartbreak, betrayal, and the exposure of a family's deepest wounds. Then there was the most stunning testimony of all. One of the estranged family members took the stand. Their voice was firm, but their eyes sparkled with unreleased tears. I tried to cover for the family, they testified. But I see now that shielding a lie only makes it more harmful. The truth had to be revealed, no matter the price. They created papers that were the opposite of what the defendant had stated. The courtroom was filled with gasps and murmurs. The attorney for the defendant stood up attempting to discredit the witness. But the evidence was clear. All of the lies had been well documented, all of the secrets revealed. The deceitful web that previously appeared to be invisible now rested in plain sight. The judge, watching in silence, permitted the testimony to flow on. There was no interjection. The room hung suspended, as if time itself had stopped. Each word dropping like a stone into a still pond, causing ripples of grief and shock to flow through those present. As the session went on, the gravity of the revelations was almost crushing. Some of the family members leaned forward with their hands clasped across their foreheads, while others sat stiff, eyes fixed straight ahead, their skin pale and etched. Even the defendant appeared to cower in their seat, knowing that the courtroom was no longer a sanctuary. Here they were being exposed for the world to see. At the end of the day, everyone knew things would never be the same. Relationships were broken, trust was broken, and the emotional wounds inflicted by the revelation of these lies would take a long time to heal after the trial. The courtroom saw not only a court proceeding, but a melodramatic, emotional battle with truth, betrayal, and the price one pays for keeping secrets too long. The tension didn't abate as the session was dismissed. Onlookers murmured among themselves. Journalists rushed to get every detail, and relatives dispersed slowly, some holding on to one another, others heading off alone, their minds 1,000 miles away. Outside stood the cameras, but within the whispers of betrayal and heartbreak lingered, suffocating and oppressive. Everyone was aware that this was just the tip of the iceberg. The unmasking of deceptions had paved the way for even greater revelations to follow. The truth so long concealed was now irreversible, and the family and the world would soon learn how profound the betrayal was. The prosecutor's statement hung in everyone's heads. Every secret has a cost. Today you have seen just how high that cost can be. And as the courtroom cleared, one thing remained uppermost in everybody's mind. The tale was only just beginning. and the next hearing promised to be even more fiery. The courtroom had hardly finished absorbing the astounding testimony from the previous day when a ripple of movement suddenly arrested everyone's attention. A door toward the rear of the room swung open, and all eyes turned automatically in its direction. The buzz of whispers rose to audible gasps. Nobody had anticipated another witness, least of all one bearing the kind of incendiary proof capable of derailing everything that had been discovered to date. The stranger strode confidently to the podium, a folder full of papers in hand. Her face was serene but unyielding, with a stark difference from the anxiety that filled the air. The camera clicks and whirring broke out as reporters snapped their cameras aloft at once. Even the accused stood still, wide-eyed hands clutched around the armrest of the chair, as if they expected to be punched. The judge's eyebrow arched. "And who do we have here?" they said, their voice level but imbued with a weightiness that demanded attention. "I am here to give the truth," the witness said, their voice level but firm. "And the truth will rewrite everything you believe about this case." A hush fell over the courtroom. Every person leaned in, sensing the gravity of what was about to unfold. The family members, already reeling from the prior revelations, exchanged nervous glances. This was someone they had not expected, someone whose testimony could shift the balance entirely. The witness unfolded his folder, and a sequence of photos, text messages, and recordings were laid before the court. The initial images drew a gasp collectively. Faces whitening, eyes bulging, the room was saturated with the enormity of the revelations. Each photo, each message, each secret interaction told a picture of deceit more intricate than anyone had envisioned. The prosecutor smiled quietly, sensing the importance of the evidence. "Your Honor, this witness has presented information that can change the direction of this trial. We seek leave to show it in full." The judge nodded and the witness started. "For years, the family lived in the carefully crafted illusion. Some truth was concealed, some things hidden. But I have proof, evidence which will not go away." They played tapes that recorded private talks in which the defendant had secretly schemed and manipulated behind the backs of those who cared for them. The words were chilling, cold, calculated. Each sentence uncovered lies carefully constructed and concealed. Gasps erupted in the room. Some onlookers clapped hands over their mouths in shock. Some leaned forward, staring at the screen, refusing to blink. A picture was circulated, a moment in time that defied all the family had assumed about a pivotal moment in their lives. The family members gasped in unison, some shaking, others hiding their faces in their hands. "How could this be?" one of them whispered, voice quivering. Another grumbled, "I never thought," as tears pricked in their eyes. Even the defendant looked taken aback for a moment. Their hands fell to their lap, and fear finally overcame the calculated calmness they'd endured throughout the trial. Sweat broke out at their brow as the reality of their exposure became undeniable. The room seemed smaller now, every look, every gasp amplified by the tension in the air. The witness went on, layering witness testimony with evidence after evidence. Hidden emails, clandestine financial transactions, and skillfully staged meetings were unveiled, each one dismantling the defendant's attempted narrative of control. The courtroom hummed with murmurs, some disbelieving, some seething with anger. The prosecution's tale now had irrepressible momentum, and the defenses of the defendant were starting to disintegrate. The judge inclined forward slightly, observing the witness intently. "This is extremely irregular," they warned, a hint of wariness in their tone, "but the court will hear it all. Go on." As the proof grew, the family started to respond overtly. One of the siblings abruptly stood up, sobbing. "All these years I believed in you," they bellowed, voice cracking. "And you deceived us step for step." The courtroom remained a collective holding of breath as the outburst of emotion reverberated throughout the walls. Other members of the family huddled in whispers among themselves, grappling with the flood of revelations. Some were frozen in shock, but others appeared to come awake to the reality of betrayal, fury welling up with each new discovery. Even the audience could sense the tension, a dense, almost palpable energy that bore down upon everyone present. And then came the most dramatic moment. The witness produced a confidential document that had never before been seen, its owner's confession in their own handwriting of taking actions that had brought such pain and turmoil into the family. The courtroom burst into mutterings, gasps, and incredulity. Cameras caught every reaction, the shaking hands, the staring eyes, the sobbing tears streaming down cheeks. It was a moment of raw, unfiltered emotion. The defendant's lawyer attempted to interject, claiming the document was fabricated or misinterpreted, but the witness had anticipated this. They presented corroborating evidence, timestamps, independent witnesses, and even recordings of conversations that confirmed the confession's authenticity. The defense's objections fell flat against the weight of undeniable truth. As the hearing went on, the disclosures made by the witness grew increasingly personal and specific. They did not just unveil the legal breaches, but even the emotional manipulation that had ruptured the relationship, bred distrust, and infected decades of family ties. Every disclosure hit home with a precision that would never have been achieved by any legal reasoning. The air inside the court was near tolerable. Each heartbeat felt magnified, each whisper echoing like a drum. Members of the family sat stiff, some shedding tears whispering, others clasping their fists in wordless anger. The face of the defendant went whiter with every fresh revelation, terror and despair replacing the smug demeanor they had assumed. Even the media felt the weight of the moment. Cameras snapped wildly, capturing every utterance, every expression. Live broadcasts took the drama unfolding in the courtroom to viewers everywhere beyond the courthouse walls. Social media alerts burst outside, as millions of viewers held their breaths for the next development in a trial that was rapidly turning into a global phenomenon. As the witness finished, there was another silence. The room hung in the balance of truth, shock, and emotional ruin. The members of the family gazed at one another, faces contorted in shock, sorrow, and betrayal. They believed they knew their past, but now everything they knew was being reconstructed before them. The judge, observing the reactions, finally spoke. This court recognizes the gravity of the evidence presented today. We will allow it to be fully examined as it appears to bear directly on the matters before us. And in that moment, it became evident the trial had changed. What had started out as a case of treason and deception had evolved into something much more volatile. A clash of truth that no one could avoid, and a discovery that would alter the lives of everyone in that room forever. The surprise witness had arrived, and with him, a tidal wave of truth that would no longer be held at bay. The defendant sat in stunned silence, crushed beneath the weight of exposure like some physical force. The family, spectators, and even the media all knew the same thing. This trial was no longer merely a matter of law, it was about the unadulterated raw power of buried truths breaking free at last. Outside the courtroom, flashbulbs burst and Twitter was abuzz, but within, the tension was still palpable. Each discovery, each rumor, each tear had etched its mark. The session was over, but the effect of the surprise twist hung, resonating in every mind and heart. Everyone understood that the tale was only just starting. If anything, it had barely started. The next hearing held out the promise of even more profound revelations, more astounding truths, and the emotional battles that would not leave a single person in the courtroom untouched. And with the fall of the gavel for the recess, only one thought flashed through everyone's mind. The truth once spoken cannot be taken back. The courtroom was still reeling from the dramatic surprise of the last session when the mood changed again. This time from tension to unbridled raw emotion. The surprise witness had revealed layers of falsehood, and now the stage was set for those whose hearts had been most severely bruised. Relatives, friends, and even close colleagues came forward to narrate the hurt, betrayal, and heartache that had conditioned their lives. The first witness came quietly, almost delicately. A sister once estranged from the defendant drifted slowly to the witness stand, every step weighed down by an unseen sorrow. Her hands shook as she clutched the podium. "I trusted you with everything," she whispered, voice cracking. "I believed in the family we created together, in our love, and yet it was all constructed on lies." Tears ran down her face as she spoke of times of manipulation that had left her doubting herself for years. The courtroom was quiet aside from soft, muffled sobs that echoed through the room. The prosecutor led her testimony softly, inquiring questions that not only exposed the legal misdoing, but the psychological manipulation that had left deep scars. With every recount, a clear picture of betrayal was painted, secrets being kept, feelings being ignored, and trust being broken. The defendants squirmed in their seat, looking down, unable to look the family members in the eye whose suffering they had inflicted.
A close family friend testified afterwards. They had watched from the outside as relationships deteriorated and laughter turned to silence. I've seen the way the lies have affected every single person in this family, they began, voice heavy with sorrow. What's worse than the deception is the way it made everyone doubt themselves. The deceit wasn't just about what they did, it was about identity, love, and trust. They swallowed hard, fighting to get their emotions in check. And it hurts to see people you love hurt because somebody decided that lying was preferable to telling the truth. The courtroom was holding its breath. Every witness added another thread to the narrative, weaving together a tapestry of hurt that no one could ignore. Parents testified about nights spent lying awake in fear of the broken family. Adults who were once children testified about how the deceptions had defined them, leaving them disoriented and emotionally wounded. Friends spoke of how manipulation had insidiously moved into their lives, leaving behind hidden scars of suspicion and worry. Even the defendant's most loyal supporters were not immune to the power of emotion. Several testified about their disillusionment. I trusted you, one sobbed openly. I stood up for you to others thinking I knew what was true. And now, everything I thought I knew is gone. The courtroom murmured softly in response, the palpable heartbeat of shock and grief hanging in the air. The defense attempted to interject, trying to minimize the testimony or challenge the credibility of the witnesses. But the mood in the courtroom had shifted. The evidence given, coupled with the raw emotion of the testimony, made it impossible to neglect the truth. All of the stories corroborated the devastating effect of the defendant's actions, not only legally, but emotionally, spiritually, and socially. One of the most poignant moments occurred when a young family member, her voice shaking so much she could hardly speak, shared an experience of blind trust broken. I looked up to you, she whispered, and you took secrets over me, over all of us. I don't even know who you are anymore. The courtroom fell silent. The defendant's face, white and tight, showed shock and guilt in equal proportions. There was no hiding from the brunt of the emotions being unleashed. And then the testimonies of those who had endured in silence for the longest time, the parents who had worked to keep the family intact despite the deceit. Their testimony carried a lifetime of hurt and disappointment. We gave you love, support, and trust, one of the parents stated, voice trembling. And you used it to conceal the truth from us. Each lie, each deception left scars that will perhaps never heal. They took a deep breath, swallowing hard, and went on. And yet, we believe somehow that honesty can still deliver us. They sobbed as the load of decades of secret betrayal cascaded into the open. The courtroom audience was shaken deeply. People in the audience mouthed words to one another, their faces softened by the intensity of the emotions. Even some of those who had attended hoping for sensational spectacle were shaken, some of them winking away tears, others sitting stiff, their faces numb at the intensity of the individual narratives. This was no longer a mere legal dispute, it was an emotional accounting that pierced through everybody in the room. The defendants' responses became more perceptible with every testimony. They trembled with their hands, their complexion turned pale, and the suave composure they had courted in previous sessions started to break down. They whispered to their lawyer, seeking comfort, but the truth was indisputable. The testimonies had revealed the sheer extent of the emotional trauma brought about by their actions. One of the most dramatic of the witness statements was given by a sibling who had been close to the defendant throughout her life. What they said was full of love, disappointment, and heartbreak. I loved you like no one else, they wailed, voice shaking with emotion. And I stood up for you when I shouldn't have. But love isn't blind, it can see lies even when we try to deny that it can. And now I understand everything, and I'm destroyed. Their cries filled the courtroom, and even strangers sensed the magnitude of their anguish.
The prosecution never let the testimonies precede moments of silence, allowing the words to sink in. The courtroom was filled with mourning, outrage, and disbelief. The testimonies gave a complete picture of the cost of secrecy, how it can ravage trust, distort relationships, and create emotional wounds that never heal. Each whisper, each tear, each shaking voice lent gravity to the proceedings, making the trial more than a legal battle. It was a human tale of sorrow and accountability. The testimonies of pain went on for hours, each one piling on the truth and agony. The audience could sense the room drawing in, as if the walls themselves were soaking up the grief. So the tension was almost palpable. Every second was electric, with expectation, every silence thick with the audience's held breath as they watched tragedy unfold. By the time the session was over, the courtroom was spent, not literally but emotionally. Family members were raw and exposed, witnesses were drained, and even the defendant was shaken visibly. The gavel came down to adjourn the session, but the reverberations of pain, heartache, and emotional reality echoed long after. Outside the courtroom, the reporters and cameras followed every exit, every tear-stained face, every shaking hand. Social media was already on fire with updates, but no news feed could possibly capture the depth of emotion that had just been exposed. The world outside would read the headlines, but inside, the emotional impact of the testimonies would still linger, telling the story for all who were part of it. This session had left one thing certain: truth cannot be buried forever, and when it comes to light, it is capable of shattering illusions, breaking relationships, and revealing the deepest, most agonizing realities. And as the audience exited, a common understanding lingered in the air. This trial was by no means over, and the ultimate revelations were sure to be more explosive. The following session would introduce the last of the pieces of the puzzle, conflicts no one could foresee, and maybe the answers everyone had been seeking, answers that would perhaps end the closure once and for all, or further deepen the wounds. The courtroom was quiet now, but the emotion, the sorrow, and the force of human truth remained in every corner. Everyone understood that what was seen today was only a small part of the story. And as the doors closed for the day, one thing remained on every mind: the emotional accounting was far from done, and the truth would keep cutting deeper than anyone could have imagined. The courtroom had been overwhelmed with emotion for days. The revealing testimonies, the surprise twists, and the unadulterated confessions had put everyone in the room on pins and needles. But now, the moment everyone was waiting for had finally come: the verdict. Silence descended like a thick veil when the judge arrived, their face inscrutable. All eyes in the courtroom were on the bench, each heartbeat echoing. Relatives gripped tissues, hands trembled, and some hugged one another tightly, preparing themselves for the blow of the verdict. Onlookers and journalists leaned forward, cameras at the ready, feeling that history was being created. The defendant sat silent, hands clasped, gazing straight ahead. That confident demeanor they had proudly worn had given way to fear, regret, and uncertainty. This was no longer a matter of legal maneuvering or astute defenses. The truth had been exposed, and now it would be determined. The judge's voice sliced into the silence. This court has examined the evidence, the testimonies, and the facts of the case presented during this trial with great care. We acknowledge the emotional and personal involvement that this case has had on all of you. Each word felt heavy with expectation in the air. The crowd breathed in unison. The family members who had suffered months of secrecy, betrayal, and heartache now waited for a resolution that could either ease their suffering or compound it. Even the media appeared to feel the weight of the moment, dropping their cameras for a momentary nervous silence. The judge went on. After due deliberation, this court holds that what the defendant has done has caused tremendous damage, legally and emotionally. Every choice, every secret, and every deception has led to the erosion of trust and pain for all concerned. A shiver collectively ran through the court. There were gasps, sobs, and some sat unmoving, trying to take in the magnitude of the moment. The defendant's face turned white, eyes wide with terror, as the force of judgment bore down upon them like a physical weight. And therefore, the judge continued, their gavel suspended in the air. This court gives the following verdict. The gavel crashed down with a deafening bang. The sound appeared to reverberate in the walls themselves of the courtroom. Gasps, wails, and whispers burst forth at once. Some of the relatives openly cried, relief and sadness commingling in their tears. Others gazed, frozen, as the results of decades of fraud at last became a matter of official record. Outside, there were flashes of cameras and social media alerts eruptions. Headlines went into real time: betrayal exposed in family, verdict has been handed down. Drama in the courtroom ends in stunning ruling. But within the courtroom, it was still a microcosm of raw emotion, where each response held a lifetime of hurt, rage, and freedom. The defendants slumped in their seat, the gravity of the verdict finally dawning. For the first time, they could not conceal, could not deceive, could not deflect themselves from the truth that had been revealed. Friends, co-workers, and relatives sat by as the fruits of their labor became inevitable. Family members started dealing with the aftermath in their own manner. Some embraced one another, crying freely, whispering words of condolence and mutual grief. Others sat quietly, looking at the ground, attempting to reconcile with a violation that had destroyed years of trust. Even the witnesses who testified in court appeared exhausted, their emotional labor done but transforming them eternally. The court, once a theater of war, had become an arena for accounting. All the tears, all the sobs, all the words of testimony had added up to a shared comprehension of harm. Not only had the trial laid bare the truth, but it had compelled everyone to face the emotional cost of secrecy, deception, and betrayal. The judge's last words echoed throughout the room. Although this decision speaks to the law of the case, emotional and personal healing will be a process that takes time. Truth is expensive, and the price has been high for all parties. The defendant was taken away, his head bowed as family members looked on, some in relief, others in stoic grief. Out in the hallway, reporters yelled questions, cameras popped, and the world demanded answers. But to the family, this was not merely a public spectacle. It was a personal turning point. A few family members addressed the media, their words trembling but resolute. "It hurt," one of them said, tears running down their face. But the truth needed to be told. "We can now start the healing process, even though the wounds will still be there." Another came in and said, "This trial was not just a trial by combat in a courtroom, it was an opportunity to deal with the falsehoods and start over." The emotional after effects of the trial lingered long after the gavel came down. Bonds that had been broken were now in the process of repairing, some rebuilding, others backing away completely. Friends and family members considered their bonds with great care, knowing that broken trust is hard to repair. Even strangers who had listened to the trial were moved by its emotional weight. Social media saw heated debates, empathy, and shock. News channels focused on the emotional testimonies, the shocking turns, and the ultimate verdict. For many, it was a harsh reminder of the price paid for secrecy, betrayal, and concealed truths. In the still moments following the verdict, family members met in private, exchanging hugs, tears, and hushed words of forgiveness. They understood that although justice had been delivered, the healing of the heart would be a long time coming. Some mused about therapy, others about rebuilding trust slowly, recognizing that the journey would be difficult but needed. The courtroom itself appeared to draw its last breath. Each nook, each bench, each wall had seen the drama of heartbreak, truth, and revelation unfold. For those who sat in it, it would forever be a site where deceptions were exposed, feelings laid bare, and lives irretrievably altered. As the family left the courtroom, there was the sense of guarded optimism. The trial had revealed the worst about their lives, but it also revealed a way towards honesty, responsibility, and ultimately healing. The defendant, taken out of the room, could do nothing but look at the outcome of the choices they had made, the irreversible harm that had been inflicted, and the truths that had been uncovered. Outside, the world hummed with wonder, shock, and amazement. Journalists swarmed to record comments, flashes popped every second, and social media went wild with commentary. But in the hearts of the most hurt, the trial had made an indelible impression, a mix of loss, relief, and the bitter, painful realization that some things, once they are known, alter lives forever. The story of the trial would be remembered, retold, and dissected for years to come. But for the family, the real aftermath was not in the headlines. It was in the quiet moments, in the whispered apologies, in the tears shed in private, and in the slow process of learning to trust and love again. And so the theatricality of the courtroom drama came to an end, not only with a verdict, but with a reckoning that exceeded the law by far. It was a tale of betrayal, of heartbreak, of emotional veracity, a tale that showed secrets, however well concealed, always have an uncanny way of surfacing. The gavel had come down. Justice had been served, And although the path to healing would be long and treacherous, the family now stood at the beginning of it, armed with one unshakable fact. The truth, however painful, is the only way to start anew.